Welcome, bros and brosophiles. My name's Albert von Stollen, and today I'ma tell about the politicians. Specifically on whether they are friends or enemies of the people. Why? Consider this a free public service. Let's define democracy first because this'll be important. Let's go! I talked about democracy last time, but I didn't define it. Now we're doing it here. So, what is democracy? This term has been so misused for the last 200 years that it begs to be properly defined. The common definition is that democracy is a form of government wherein political power rests on the people. The people are defined as the voters during elections. This is done in a few ways. Since we are going for the politicians, this means elections and to a lesser extent mass demonstrations. The politicians get their power and legitimacy through the ballot whenever elections happen. This, of course, implies that elections are nothing much more than popularity contests rather than judging the candidates for their competence. While there are decent politicians who do get elected, namely the current mayor of Manila in 2019, it is far more likely to get the more pathetic politicians, such as the current president and one of the senators, both in 2016, elected into office. Elections also give a level of advantage to celebrities. This is not just a Filipino thing but also an American thing. In the United States, they had an actor for president. The guy had an acting career which spanned 20 years and went from acting roles on radio to the silver screen. Aside from the current mayor of Manila, who was an actor in the 1990s right until 2019, there's also the mayor's predecessor who is an actor from 1957 to 2009. He first entered politics in 1967 and became the mayor of the city of San Juan. He later became a senator in 1987, the vice president in 1992, the president in 1998, got impeached in 2001, placed under house arrest from 2001 to 2007, and became the city mayor of Manila in 2013. All that said, being a celebrity is not a guarantee for political power. Before we continue, I'll go with a disclaimer. I do not want to do away with the political class. After all, they provide important jobs to society. Rather, I want to give them some oversight. This is to ensure that the politicians actually behave rather than cause problems. The electorate, despite the promising trends of the 2019 midterm election, just can't provide the much necessary oversight by definition. Hence, it would be better to have a monarch provide this oversight. Why? To protect the peoples of the realm from the machinations of the politicians. The political class is harder for the people to deal with as a collective than individually. This is because if one resigns, someone else, typically from the same party, although people being replaced by someone else from other parties do happen, gets to replace the previous politician. And thus, the insanity continues without much changing. The electorate can usually deal with the political class during elections. Mass demonstrations happen, but it's usually a bunch of mobs protesting. A monarch can deal with them more because elections only happen once every few years, and because a monarch is a single person who is trained in statecraft from birth, whereas the electorate have multiple viewpoints and usually have no training in statecraft at all. The politicization of the masses also forces them to engage in politics instead of dealing with more pressing issues. Now we'll continue. Another problem with the political class is how they have a massive greed for funds. The salary of a politician varies by position. As such, this ranges from the vice mayors who get around 2,407 US dollars a month to the president who gets around $7,995 per month. That being said, there are also politicians whose source of income had been less than legal. When the previous mayor of Manila was the president, He and his associates had gotten money from illegal gambling. He was impeached for plunder in the year 2001, all because his associates blew the whistle on the whole thing, all because the guy in question did not get his cut of the whole operation. What do they need all that money for, you ask? Simple. To ensure that they get to gain and consolidate their power. While there are politicians who do put that money to good use, they are the exception which proves the rule. With the current mayor of Manila, he puts that money to good use by cleaning Manila's many streams, clearing the streets of vendors, and then giving said vendors a place to sell their wares by building markets for them. By cleaning Manila's streams, this gives jobs to some people and thus a source of livelihood. This also improves the public health of the people who live and work beside the streams and helps in Manila's flood prevention. By clearing the streets and sidewalks of vendors, this improves the traffic situations as cars and the like don't have to constantly reroute, all because some streets tend to get blocked by many vendors selling their wares. By building markets, he gives the vendors an incentive to not block the street selling wares and a place for them to sell their wares to the public. The construction of markets also gives people a source of livelihood because the people who build these markets get paid from the city government's coffers, which helps stimulate the economy, much like with the vendors and the sanitation workers. Instead of using it for zone aggrandizement, he uses it to help his constituents. Another problem is the lack of fulfillment of campaign promises. I mentioned the previous president and how he did not fulfill his campaign promise of cleaning up the government. Instead, he focused more on promoting contraceptives to the urban poor, all because he and the politicians who supported that bill feared the large numbers of urban poor. I am of course referring to the reproductive health law which was passed in 2012. There's also the issue of political partisanship. In America, this manifests under the Democrat versus Republican divide complete with the American culture wars. In the Philippines, this manifests with how the politicians tend to be political turncoats in general. Let's look at one example of this, the current president. Prior to the 2016 presidential elections, he was in the Liberal Party alongside the likes of his predecessor and certain senators. But in 2015, he decided to run under a different party, all because the Liberal Party chose someone else instead of him. So, with all this said, are they the friends or the enemies of the people? I do think that with some oversight, they can be the friends of the people. Under the current system, however, their self-interests are at odds with the people, exceptions notwithstanding. In the next video, I'm gonna go after the socialists and communists. See y'all later!